Pier Giorgio was born into the influential Frassati family and was very close to his parents. Despite the tense home environment, Pier Giorgio was described as an avalanche of life. He loved sports, music, and reading, and his strong character and contagious joy defined him. Even as a child, he had a deep desire to help others. On one occasion, when a woman came begging at the Frassati household with her son, who had no shoes, Pier Giorgio felt so compassionate that he took off his own shoes and gave them to the boy. Along with his compassion for the poor, Frassati had a deep spiritual life. Pier Giorgio prayed daily, offering, among other prayers, a daily rosary on his knees by his bedside. Often his agnostic father would find him asleep in this position. At a young age, he obtained permission to receive daily communion which he had a deep love for. As Frassati said,
"I urge you with all the strength of my soul to approach the Eucharistic table as often as possible. Feed on this bread of the angels, from which you will draw the strength to fight inner struggles."
At the age of 17, he joined the Saint Vincent de Paul Society and gave much of his spare time to helping the sick and those less fortunate. He always had his pockets full of notes with the addresses of people to help. With the little that Frassati had, he would give to the poor, even donating his bus fare money to charity and then running home instead. Once in Berlin, he arrived home without his coat because he left it to a poor person that was freezing on the pavement. He dedicated his life to help the poor and the suffering. He was once known to have said,
"Every one of you knows that the foundation of our religion is charity. Without it, all our religion would crumble, because we would not truly be Catholics, as long as we did not carry out, or rather shape our whole lives, by the two commandments in which the essence of the Catholic faith lies: to love God with all our strength and to love our neighbor as ourselves."
When Frassati graduated from his studies in the 1920s, his father offered him a car or a good amount of money for graduating. Frassati chose the money so that he could donate it to the poor because he knew that they needed it more than he did. Pier Giorgio also loved sports. He was an avid outdoorsman and loved hiking, riding horses, skiing, and mountain climbing. He was never one to pass on playing a practical joke either. He was extremely popular with his peers, known by the nickname Terror due to his practical jokes. He relished laughter and good humor. Another nice thing about him is that he wasn't perfect. He wasn't a very good student, especially at first. With so many activities, he wasn't always studying. That makes him a normal person. He might not have excelled in academics, but he was incredibly smart. He organized regular hikes into the mountains with friends in which they would regularly talk about their faith or pray whilst in nature. His habit was to attend Mass before the trip and then visit the Blessed Sacrament on the way back. He had a deep love for the Eucharist and regularly would spend entire nights in adoration to the Blessed Sacrament. As Frassati said,
"Jesus comes to me every morning in Holy Communion. I repay him, in my very small way, by visiting the poor. The house may be sordid, but I am going to Christ."
Most notably, Pier Giorgio lived his faith through constant, humble, and often hidden service to the poorest in Turin. Despite growing up in a privileged environment, he never flaunted his family's wealth and prestige. Instead, he lived simply and generously, giving away food, money, or anything anyone asked of him. It is believed that he contracted polio from the very people he was ministering to in the slums, a disease that would ultimately take his life. Even as Pier Giorgio lay dying, his final week of rapid physical deterioration was an exercise in heroic virtue. His attention was turned outward toward the needs of others, and he never drew attention to his anguish, especially since his own grandmother was dying at the same time he was. Pier Giorgio's heart was surrendered completely to God's will for him. His last concern was for the poor. On the eve of his death, with a paralyzed hand, he scribbled a message to a friend, reminding the friend not to forget the injections for Converso, a poor man Pier Giorgio had been assisting. When news of Pier Giorgio's death on July 4, 1925, reached the neighborhood and city, the Frassati parents, who had no idea about the generous self-donation of their young son, were astonished by the sight of thousands of people crowded outside their mansion on the day of their son's funeral, mass, and burial. Some people may question why Frassati decided to live a life of so many sacrifices that to many would seem too hard. But in Frassati's own words,
"The end for which we are created invites us to walk a road. That is surely sown with a lot of thorns, but it is not sad. Through even the sorrow, it is illuminated by joy. A true Catholic life may challenge us in ways the world doesn't understand, but it will provide profound meaning, with the ultimate goal of being in heaven with our Lord Jesus Christ."